The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good day from Lamert Park, right here in South Los Angeles. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Reverend Kelvin Sauls. It is a joy to have all of you join us today as we continue here on Faith Without Borders to engage in thought-provoking conversation for transformational action. But also, we want to make sure our conversation is solutions-driven as we tackle some of the critical issues facing our communities here in South Los Angeles, in the United States, and around the world. And so we're so glad that you're joining us today. I'm very excited about today's episode program. I guess I'm excited about all of them because our topics are real thought-provoking. And I'm so glad that for today's topic, we have some distinguished leaders in our community who are at the forefront of what's happening around state-sanctioned violence, what's happening around reform of the prison industrial complex, but just in general, what's going on around the lives of black people in this yet-to-be United States of America. So today, we're going to be doing some perspectives on that painful, hurtful, powerful, but also hopeful mini-series by Ava DuVernay entitled When They See Us. I know I can't stop thinking about it, talking about it. I post on social media at least once a day something about it because of its relevancy, not just based on what happened in 1989, but also what's happening today. And so we want to do some bridging, make some connections between what happened then, what's going on today, and how do we move forward with some strategic solutions as we continue this fight for the dignity of black people in this yet-to-be United States of America. Today I'm pleased to have two friends and colleagues here with me. So to my left, I have Dr. Melina Abdullah, who is the chair of the Pan-African Studies at Cal State Los Angeles. And so glad that she's here. She's also part of the core leadership for Black Lives Matter here in Los Angeles. She's one of the organizers, and she wanted me to mention that she's a mama too. So glad to have a mama here, a leader, an activist, and one who is out there, on the forefronts, continuing to fight the fight against state-sanctioned violence, police violence. And so we are all about that as part of our reflection today. And then also it's a joy to have my friend, my brother, and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Art Cribbs, here with us. He is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Interfaith Movement for Human Dignity. That is a statewide multiracial, multi-faith movement that continues to be at the forefront around criminal justice reform, as well as so many other issues to safeguard and secure the humanity and the dignity of all people. So glad to have him here. He's also the pastor at the American Filipino or the Filipino American UCC Church in Eagle Rock, where I've had the opportunity to worship, several times and be with him. So welcome, my sister, my brother. So glad you could be here with us for this timely and powerful conversation as we tackle, what I think everybody's talking about, not just on social media, but in so many, other spaces and places. And so I'm glad that today we can actually, join and have this conversation. I want to start us off. I had the opportunity to watch this the night it premiered. I was, attending a violence prevention conference in Chicago, and got to the hotel room and was wondering, okay, what am I gonna do tonight? We finished what we had to do. We were hanging out, with some of the folk that attended. So I went to the hotel room and turned on my Netflix, and boom, there it was. It says premiering tonight. And even though I've seen it, I probably forgot about it. And so I watched it. I watched all episodes.
Oh, wow.
Because I just could not, stop watching it. So as one born and raised in South Africa, and understanding what happened to us in South Africa, I just could not, stop, watching it, and had tears in my eyes, was filled with pain and hope, flashbacks, trauma, Lord have mercy, all of it. And I wanted to start off our conversation today by just getting some reflections. I'm very intrigued by the title of this series. So I'm going to ask Dr. Melina Abdullah and Reverend Art Cripps to just, share their thoughts first and foremost before we look, at any content. Your thoughts about, why this was named, or, what did this conjure up? Just this title, When They See Us. Melina?
Well, thank you for having me. That's a way to start. I first saw the film. I actually got to see two parts of it. Ava did a special screening about a month before it came out. And I've been in community with Yusuf and some of the other folks before, right? And so Yusuf came to Cal State LA. Dr. Yusuf Salam came to Cal State LA last year as they were making the film. And so I'm also of the same generation, right? Even though I say I'm 29, I'm really the same age as most of the members of the Central Park Five, or the Exonerated Five, as they're now calling themselves.
That's right. That's what they call themselves now.
And, when I so I was late to the screening. I couldn't make the first two episodes. I saw the second two episodes first. And then I saw the first two episodes on the Friday that it premiered. Both of my daughters are co-founders of the Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard. And so the young people, and when I say young people, I mean middle school and high school, decided that they wanted to see this in community. They didn't want to see it by themselves, that they wanted to see it with other young people and their parents. And so we had a screening that Friday night, and that was the first time I saw the first two episodes. I think that just kind of, and I know you said don't talk about content yet, so I won't. But I'll say, when I think about the title, When They See Us, just something that comes out both in the experience, kind of having lived through what happened with that horrific case, right? But also the experiences that my children have, that young people have. We know that there's a vast difference between the way the state, the way white folks, the way police see us and the way we see ourselves. And so the title for me is about that, is about they don't see us, or when they see us, they have these conjured up images of who we are. Bell Hooks says the most dangerous place for a black person is in the imagination of white folks, right? And their imaginings, if you think about, how they kept calling us criminals, but beyond criminals, animals, right? If you think about Donald Trump, calling for the execution of these children, and when we say children, we're talking 14 years old, 15 years old. The oldest was 16. Right? One hadn't even made it to high school yet. And when we think about, two of them hadn't made it to high school yet. When we think about that, when they see us, it really is a vast difference from the truth of who we are.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's powerful. Reverend Krubbs?
I like the way Dr. Abdullah opened up, because when they see us is perhaps as important as how we see us. And it's impossible to divide the two in the context of this society. Dr. King, when he spoke at Occidental College in 1957, did an analysis that went back to the days of Reconstruction and the first Jim Crow, and the undoing of progress that was made by African people in the United States during that period. And he compared that to the deconstruction of advancements in the 20th century. And as we move now into the 21st century, more progress was made following the Civil War before the First World War than the progress that was made during and following the Civil Rights Movement. That's Dr. King's analysis. I think it's really important for us to put the mirror in front of ourselves. See, how do we see ourselves? What comes from our mouths? What runs through our brain? I'm going to probably get in trouble on this one, but we have participated, not necessarily consciously, but intentionally, in our own demise through imagery and messaging that we've created. What I find fascinating, I've spent most of my life in media, what I find fascinating is the allure of money and fame that becomes kind of a Judas syndrome to put forward both image and message that denigrates women, denigrates community, and say, I'm not worth much either. And we have done this now for more than 2 generations. And it's almost commonplace. It's almost to a point where it's true. It's true because that's all we've known. And I know that is not a popular position. And it's not even a blame the victim position. It is a historical record that by intention, persons were positioned to put forward and to mass produce image and message that has had an impact and influence. And graveyards are filled with the impact, prisons are filled with the impact, and self-denial is one of the results. Now, that's not the whole story, but I cannot ignore what has occurred without sufficient commentary and reversal. I want to believe we're going to get there, but the impact currently. So that's one thing. The second thing is our demography and our geography birth us into being suspects. Just by where we live and who we are and how we look in this society. How do we overcome that? As a 14-year-old, I was a Junior Olympics gold medalist, student body president, editor of the newspaper, captain of the debate team, spread eagle on my grandmother's front yard for coming home at 8:45 when there was a 9:30 curfew in Los Angeles. I was a suspect because of my geography and my demography. at 19, I'm leasing cars in West Hollywood, and I'm driving throughout Los Angeles County, and I must tell you, every day, not some days, every day, I was stopped by the L.A. County Sheriff's Department. Not one time was I asked, how are you doing? How may I help you? I was spread eagle. I was across cars. I was sat on the sidewalk. I was up against the wall because my demography did not match the vehicles that I was hired to drive to deliver across the county. I was a suspect. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of things that I think when we talk about how they see us, mm-hmm. most times they don't, mm-hmm. particularly as human beings. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Can I just build on something real mm-hmm. quick? So you saw me cringe a little bit, right, about mm-hmm. these images. Mm-hmm. I think that it's really important that we understand that there are entire structures that are deliberately created mm-hmm. in order to advance particular images, and we don't have the power over those structures. So yes, there's always been people of every single group who are willing to put their individual advancement ahead of the collective advancement. Right. But that's not largely, by and large, who we are as black people. Most black people do not sell out. In fact, if we look at the data, black people have a higher degree of linked fate than any other group anywhere in the world. That's right? And so it's really important that we understand that, one of the reasons why, we celebrate Nipsey Hussle, right, mm-hmm. is because of his, very forthright assertion that black people are all connected, right? And people mislabel him as a black capitalist. He was not. He was someone who believed in black cooperative economics, right? And so it's important that we uplift that. And so when you talk about what's happening to black people in particular, we have to remember that this is intention. Manning Marable writes about this mm-hmm. beautifully in How Capitalism Underdeveloped Black America, right? He says that these systems are deliberately and intentionally built to produce these outcomes. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just the targeting of you as Art Cribbs, we're going to lay you across your grandmother's front yard. It's every black person has experienced this. That's right. It's not just that they were going or are going, how can we find, the few black people who will sell their community out for a little chunk of change, right? It was deliberate, right? If we think of media outlets, there's no media outlets, mainstream media outlets that are controlled by black people, not even BET, right? And so they create these systems in order to keep us oppressed, in order to justify the way in which they see us, and the way they see us, and I'm sure you're going here, but the way they see us, and this is part of what's embedded in what you were saying, the way they see us produces tangible, harmful, murderous outcomes, mm-hmm. right? So you got off light because you survived those interactions. That's right. I'm thinking about Ryan Twyman, who was just killed on 132nd and San Pedro, simply sitting in his car, mm-hmm. right? He was murdered by L.A. County Sheriff when they were on a murder spree on Thursday. They killed 4 people in less than 12 hours, right? One of them being Ryan Twyman. They were able to see this freshly minted 24-year-old black man, father of 3, who was super involved in his children's life with his partner, doing the things that he needed to do, a strong member of his community. They were able to say, what are these black men doing in this car? Mm-hmm. Come in shooting and get off not only every round in their handgun, but then go back to the car, get a rifle, and shoot him some more, right? Because that's what happens when they see us. They target us intentionally for death and demise. And so I just wanted to add that to what you said.
Sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because, you're talking about, schemes and systems designed,
right?
For almost collective destabilization, if not annihilation. And as one who was born and raised in South Africa, on the south side of Johannesburg, now living on the south side of, Los Angeles, I have to say that there is a direct correlation between, U.S. or Western domestic, policy towards communities of color, black communities, and its foreign policy towards countries of color.
Well,
and I have to say to you that the goal is the same, in terms of, either, destabilization or annihilation. And that is, we have historical proof, around that,
Well, there was Robert Kennedy speaking in Pretoria, talking about USA. And he gave a speech that made folk in the parliament uncomfortable. And he said, of course, I'm talking about the United States of America and not the Union of South Africa.
Right.
The twinning of our countries, right, are so closely aligned that you can tell your story and someone listening here in the United States will swear you're talking about them.
Right.
I mean, we're so twin.
There's a lot of bridging and connecting going on. We want to get to the content because, again, so masterfully written and directed by Ava. I was just spellbound, in terms of just how she really deconstructed it in the first episode, this term, the Central Park Five. Because that was a name that the media foisted upon them. These were, individuals. They didn't even know each other. In terms of that, so it was just crazy in terms of that. But your thoughts on just the content, how Ava did it. What it brings out for us, in terms of what happened back then. And we're going to get to what's going on right now, but, we can go back and forth. Yes. I'm cool with that in terms of that. But any thoughts, Dr. Abdullah, in terms of just, the content, of what happened?
So I'm pulling up a text right now that I sent after I'd seen it to Ava. And I said, my God, I'm completely overwhelmed. No words. I only caught the last two parts, looking forward to seeing the first two, right? And the way that she responded back was that, and this really helped me to see it a little differently. She said, this is my love letter to black boys, to all of our boys, right? To all of our black boys. And I remember when I saw, I think it was episode 3 about Corey. No, it was episode 4 maybe. It is the only time I remember being in a film and sobbing, not crying.
And she dedicated the whole episode for the most part was to his experience, and that was just.
And I think the build up to that, right, to that difference, that juxtaposition between how they treated Corey and how they treated all of them, right? But then the intense love that we have for each other, right? So when the sister was visiting, what's the little boy's name? The 14-year-old.
I see his face.
Yeah. But she was talking about get yourself something to look forward to, right? And there was just this love between, the families, but also in the community, right? So when they came home and how the community embraced them and like this juxtaposition, we know our children, it doesn't mean that there's no complications, because complications were all up in there, especially right around Corey's
family,
sister and mother.
I didn't even know that, yes.
But there's so much love that's complicated. That's, also, there's the, what does Joy DeGruy call it, right? Post-traumatic slave syndrome, that we're still bearing, the trauma of enslavement, but also the trauma of what we go through every day. And so all of that comes into community and comes into families. But watching it, I just, I love that our boys were presented as boys. And I mean boys. I mean, when she said this is her love letter to our boys, right? That she saw them as children. She presented them as children. She presented them as, I guess we were supposed to understand the lens that white supremacy sees them through, but you couldn't help but feel who they are to us. And I'm a mom.
She humanized them. I mean, in so many.
And made them into, our boys are adultified all the time. Yeah. They're not adults. They're babies. These are ones that you wanted to reach through the screen and grab. And then I'll be quiet after this.
Don't be quiet.
I kept thinking about the grace, God's grace, that allowed their exoneration. And I like the term exonerated 5, and I also see that as troubling in some ways.
Yeah, right.
Because there's so many of our boys who will never be exonerated.
That's right.
That was God's grace, because what if that hadn't happened? What if the real killer hadn't have been in there and hadn't have had some kind of, coming to, whatever creator he claims moment, right? Those boys would have never been viewed by the world. Now, I love also that she uplifted that the black community never abandoned them.
That's right.
The black community always understood their innocence, right? The black community stood there for them throughout everything and understood what was happening to them, that understood that these are, Scottsboro boys. These are, this is Emmett Till. This is what's happened to so many of us over so many generations. But if it hadn't have been for the particular ways things lined up, the 5 of them would still be there, or some of them would still be bearing the brunt of it. They would not be the exonerated 5. So how many who are in there should also be exonerated? How many who are in there, are, Brian Stevenson writes about this all the time, right? Not just the innocence of folks, but also the ways in which they're adultified, the ways in which we're putting children in adult prisons, right? The ways in which children, this is the only developed nation in the world that will execute people for what they've done as children, right? How could we do that? And I think what the series demands of us, somebody, I can't remember who posted this on social media, but somebody said that he was tired of hearing people say that they were pained or traumatized or hurt by it. And what he was saying is, it's not enough to be pained and it was Dr. Charles Davis from USC. It's not enough to be pained and traumatized and hurt by it. We got to do something
about it, yeah.
We have to remember there's thousands upon thousands of our children who are in these positions right now. My goddaughter was incarcerated for years and never put on trial. She was 15 years old when they snatched her up because they claim her boyfriend did something. And they were trying to get her to flip on him. And she didn't have anything to say. So they just kept her locked up thinking they would break her. Because children in this juvenile injustice system, they don't have rights, the same rights that we supposedly do.
And actually what happened to them, without adults being present, just without attorneys being present,
right.
That was just an abomination, and a miscarriage of justice,
I want to amplify because you said it so quickly, and that is love, right? Love is not an abstract.
Right.
It is a power, it is a force, and it is our saving grace. How to be love, how to embody love, how to appreciate love, how to practice love, to understand it is powerful. Self-care, love for self, love for community, love for one another. It's recorded in all the sacred texts, and it's not just put there as a good idea.
Right.
It is a survival mechanism. It is the grounding of our very being. And how do we access it, right? It's been cheapened through the commercialization of something that is stamped as love. but the essence of our existence is rooted in the affirmation of life itself, right? This conversation cannot take place if one of us is missing. This conversation.
Right.
Our relationships, our communal, familial ties must be rooted in love. Because like anything else, it is when we need it most, it must be well practiced to be executed appropriately.
Yes.
Right? Love is that very thing. And I just wanted to amplify that because, Doctor, you named it. The difference between success and brokenness, success and failure, success and being able to live through it is the depth of love and affection one has, yes, for self, but beyond oneself, because love is always connected to others.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And how do we practice that? How do we find the way to recover and discover the essential part of our very being? We are birthed because of love. Right? We come and have our ability to matriculate the institution, to live through the day because someone loved us, cared for us, and because we loved ourselves enough to preserve their effort. I just want to amplify, right? The importance of love, what that really is, the depths of love, not just the shallow impression of love, right? We have gone through so much, and the only reason we have this conversation is because of the depth of love that was energized and shared and encouraged and practiced. Because in those moments when we got nothing else, it's only love that will sustain us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, we don't just talk about any, lightweight love here. I mean, we're talking about love that really starts with love of self, love of people, love of culture, love of history, not as a source of embarrassment, but as a source of empowerment, and for enlightenment as we move forward.
It causes us never
facing the future.
It causes us never to forget. She is a human being. He is a human being. I mean, it's love that helps us to see clearly, not only the fact that he, she, we are human beings, but what that really means.
So how, we saw the sacrifices made, by the families in general, but in particular the mothers, in this movie. The other piece, I saw an interview that Ava did, and she, mentioned that, when one person is incarcerated, the entire family is incarcerated. That's a powerful and profound statement, in terms of that. What is your, sense of, what happened to the agency of family, in that Harlem community because of this gross miscarriage of injustice?
Yeah, of course, you can only see through your eyes, right? So when I'm watching the film and I'm watching what's happening to these children, one of the things that made me the saddest, and not just sad, but sad and angry, was the complete taking away of power of me as their mom, or of the moms, right? And I think about, we often talk about how police evolved from slave catchers, right? And it felt the same, right? It felt like, I believe in something called transgenerational memory. I believe that, what we've experienced as African people doesn't just leave because those who physically experienced it, their bodies might have been lost, right? That I am my grandmother's granddaughter, and she's her grandmother's granddaughter. And so all of the traumas heaped upon my bloodline, I experience, right? Live in me, right? And so I think it's why, and I don't want to get off track, but I think it's also one of the reasons why that African Americans have been so invested in the work along the Mexican border, right? Family separation, ending family separation, because people would go, why are African Americans, why do we care about it? We are totally overrepresented in that work.
Right.
We were one of the first groups to experience family separation, and it resonates for us on a kind of metaphysical level. Like when you see mothers and children being separated, it triggers that memory of our foremothers being separated from their children. Right.
Middle passage experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so as I was watching the way in which the police took these children, I kept seeing it through the eyes of their mothers, right? And I kept I felt some of that. It is family separation. What they engaged in is family separation. They took children away from their moms. I know afterwards, I told, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but oh well. I told my middle child, who you know, Amara. Amara is a free spirit.
That's right.
Who tends to get herself in trouble. She's brilliant. She's an artist. And the world doesn't always like free black girls, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
And I told Amara, because she gets in little trouble here and there, I said, Amara, I don't care what you did. If you do something big and they coming for you, I will never tell, and we all run into Mexico, right? like I can't hand my children over to police, because this film reminds us of what will be done, that they cannot be trusted. Black people should always remember that they cannot be trusted. Do not call them. We have a couple of killings that happened over the last couple of weeks where families called police. There was one of a teenage girl who was suicidal. Called 911. Police show up and they shoot her in the head instead of her shooting herself. Right? How is that helpful? Right? But also that they continue with the claimed power of slave catchers and enslavers in separating mothers from their children.
But I think we have to help in the recovery of the humanity of people who become police officers. I don't think we can, because in fact, they are our sisters and brothers. They are our sisters and brothers. They are our neighbors. Before they were police officers, they were family members, and they still are family members. They are in our community. Some are residents here. Others are patrolling through here. I cannot give up on a human being. I mean, the depth of love will not allow me to give up on that.
So I'm wondering. You can do. I give up.
Yeah, that's right. We have different assignments.
But I'm just wondering whether there's a difference between giving up and holding accountable.
Absolutely.
We have to hold accountable
in terms of that. I mean that's. We have to deal with implicit bias that's happening.
We have to tell the truth.
With, a cultural incompetency.
We have to tell the truth. We have to call it out.
What I call a policy of shoot to kill and then ask questions later on.
Right.
We have to deal with, that doesn't mean giving up. Accountability, I believe, is a way of inviting folk into humanity, because that's in so many ways.
I think there is a social analysis that has to be called out here. The idea that the Atlantic slave trade ended has to be clarified. It did not stop. It transformed. It did not stop.
That's right.
The mentality, the ways in which people are treated. Let me just say a quick word. We across the country in 2019 are fighting for a $15 an hour wage increase, and some of us are celebrating that. Where can you live on $15 an hour today in the state of California, in the city of Los Angeles? Where?
Nowhere. That's why we got a rise in homelessness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I just want to make a point. And I'm not knocking union. I mean, my organization was created by the labor movement. But when we give in to the idea that we're celebrating $15 an hour as a sustainable, livable wage, and you have to make critical choices on $15 an hour. Am I going to eat? Am I going to avoid my medication? Am I going to not put gasoline in my car? Am I going to pay rent? it's insufficient. And I just use that as an example. The Atlantic slave trade never stopped in this country. It just transformed. It became accommodating. And so we have people, when you get incarcerated, you have voluntarily been placed in a free labor camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right about that. I mean, if you look at, and I think, Dr. Abdullah mentioned that, if you look at, the first police department in this country, which came out of, Boston, I mean, the prescription for them was basically just a reformed version of what was happening on plantations in terms of how
they
to
were slave catchers.
Folk around them.
That
and then the other piece, I think Michelle Alexander does the same, thing when she writes about the new Jim Crow, connecting. I mean, Ava did the whole 13th piece. So there are all these correlations, that I think we need to really, acknowledge and look at and try and see how we can use that, to challenge ongoing policies. You see, that continue to either acquiesce to, if not justify, state-sanctioned violence, as it occurs in so many of our cities.
Right. And I'll just add, when you said you don't want to give up on them.
I can't.
I want to make sure that we understand that we're not talking about individuals. We're talking about a system.
A system, that's right. A structure.
And so... you could say, there were black overseers, right? You could say, well, there are sisters and brothers. I don't want to give up on them. They're black too. We got to love them, right?
Rescue them.
Here's the issue. It's not about them. I'm sure individual police officers' mamas love them. They're probably funny. They, treat their moms well. Well, sometimes, because, they're also the occupation that abuses women the most, right? It's not about them, though, as individuals. It's about the system. So when you choose to be a part of a system that you nodded your head when we said comes out of slave catching and intentionally targets our people for demise, we're talking about the system. Now, if you chose to be a part of that system, then that accountability befalls you too, right? So it's not about the individual. Somebody's going to say, oh, but my father's a police officer. He's one of the good ones. Well, the entire system is rotten.
Right. That's right. So
that's right.
Getting back to content, the 4th episode, that focused on Brother Wise, the prison guards.
The one
you
nice
had
guard,
you had a nice white prison guard, and you had a mean black prison guard. I mean that I think demonstrates the systematic and structural challenge that we're dealing with here. In terms of how racism and dehumanization manifests itself. In our society.
Well, I go back to that institution that we call slavery has not stopped. It never stopped. Right. So, and when it comes to law enforcement, very quickly, look at what's happening today across the United States. If you ask any police chief, any police executive, what is your number one issue, the one that is costing you time, personnel, resources? Homelessness. Why is that an issue for the police department? When many of the people who are homeless are also mentally ill, not all, but they are under resourced to be able to live in a house for many people. Housing is not a police issue. Homelessness is not a police issue, but we have given that to them as a society. We're saying this is a problem, you solve it. The doctors, mental health people, should be on the front lines. We who are clergy should be on the front lines. We need to stand in the gap and say again, 911 is not the right call to make when a person is episodic. 911 is not the right call to make when someone lives on the sidewalk because they have no place else to live. Not the right call. That's the institutional demise in which we are existing today.
Right, and I mean, again, trying to bring it back to what we're talking about. The homeless count numbers came out, and again, in Los Angeles City and County, most people who are homeless or houseless, are black people.
Right.
Increased 16% in 1 year.
Studies show that homelessness among young people up 24%. Guess who most of those young people are? They are young. They are black young people. In terms of that. So speaking of this issue of blackness, I want to read a quote from Michael B. Jordan, who was at the ACLU's 25th anniversary event where the exonerated five were honored, and present was Dr. Yusef Salaam. This is what Michael B. Jordan said. He said, "It's dangerous in America when you're living in a black body." Your response to that, Dr. Abdullah?
I mean, we know that. We know that it's dangerous to live in a black body. I think, so here's what I've been grappling with, I guess, around this, right? And I tried, I made a feeble attempt to kind of say it earlier, right? That black bodies make us targeted, right? We are targeted because we are black, right? My children are regularly pulled out of class and randomly searched, right? I started thinking about my son. My son is 9. And I felt like his young childhood gave him some level of protection, even though he was only 4 years old the first time he was threatened by an officer. But I still felt like coming home, walking home from school, he has some level of protection. I don't know what's going to happen when he hits 12, right? So there's, this acknowledgement that we're targeted, right? Because we live in black bodies, right? There's a lot of conversation about black bodies. And so over the last couple of years, several years, people have been talking about black bodies. And I don't know why it always made me a little uncomfortable to talk about black bodies. I think the reason it made me uncomfortable is because I feel that my blackness is not just my body, right? And so our bodies are targeted. Our bodies can make it dangerous to live. But here's what I'm kind of thinking about and speaking at the same time, which is a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway, right?
That's okay.
Is that our spirits give us power. There's no spiritual power like the power of a black person, So, yeah, it's dangerous to live in a black body, and God wouldn't have created us in black bodies if we weren't also given the power of the black spirit, right? And so I think that, if you want to fight on your hands, mess with somebody black and see what happens, right? We ain't going down quietly, right? And
hell no.
Hell no. And so I think that, yes, it's dangerous, and we have to do a better job of reclaiming the power of our spirits, our soul work. Yeah.
So it's more than just physical body. There's spirit, there's
right.
mind.
And that's how we always win. It's always been spirit, right? Think about the end of colonialism on the continent. Think about the first free African country outside of the continent, right? The Toussaint Louverture's work. Think about the end of chattel slavery. Think about the end of the first wave of lynching. Think about black unionization. Think about civil rights movement, right? On down to the movements we're in right now. We win every single time because we summon spiritual work.
And just to say, I mean, the night prior to Haitian liberation, there was a spiritual
absolutely
event that took place, that kind of preceded what happened, around that.
I just want to say, and I'm going to say it publicly for the first time, and that's thank you, Pastor Sauls. 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago today almost. I took my children to Namibia and to South Africa. Your family hosted us in South Africa. Oh, wow. And I did it intentionally because I wanted them to experience. At the time, the students were making demands around free education, which had been promised and not delivered. I wanted my children to experience that. I didn't want them to hear about it, read about it. I wanted to go to South Africa and expose them to it. I wanted them to see again the power and the spirit of the children who were there. The other is, we cannot have this conversation and not state again 2019 is the 40th commemoration of the Atlantic slave trade that brought too many of us here without permission, without our permission. In Ghana today, that commemoration is being recognized as the year of the return of the diasporans, those of us who are in the diaspora. Our tie to the continent, although some of us may have never been there, is not broken and it is not lost. It is in us, and I appreciate that the power of the Spirit.
Oh, is there?
It's in us. I was in church in Ghana the first time, and all of a sudden, I'm singing songs my ears are hearing for the first time, but my brain knew those songs. My soul knew those songs, and I'm saying, what's going on here? For the first time, 2 days in Ghana, I began to have a physical reaction. And I tried to, self-analysis, right? What am I feeling? And I discovered after 2 days, I was experiencing my humanity in a physical way for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I just say that to say to our sisters and brothers, take a trip home. There is a campaign to return 11 million black people to Africa right now, in process right now. Go home. Go home. And someone says, well, I don't know where. Wherever you land, you're at home.
Yeah, and I mean, again, as an African, a South African, don't just come home with a Western mentality. A lot of work has to be done before folk get home. So we may need to spend some time with folk.
Say a little bit more about that, because your nephew spoke to that too.
Yeah, so that we don't have our sisters and brothers from the West coming home to just do an upgrade and updated versions what the colonizers did to us. So I think and we can have some more conversation about that. But there are a lot of movements taking place to help those who are in the diaspora get to know and understand what's happening in particular countries. Because remember I said Western foreign policy is not that different than Western domestic policy, countries of color, communities of color, or black communities and black countries. So a lot. I can say a lot about that.
The last thing on that point, I want to go back to the topic here, and that is the 5 brothers in Central Park were guilty before they were born, and they had to prove themselves innocent.
Yeah.
What happened? It was interesting in law school. The first thing I understood was, it's never what you do. It's who you are and where you are. Because what you do may get you incarcerated, and someone doing the exact same thing may get a medal and a reward. The exact same thing. We have to understand the social reality that black folk in the United States, I don't care who you are, what you do, how you present yourself, you are a suspect, and you are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah. I have so many more questions, but our time is running low. But I do want to ask a couple of more questions, and then I also want for us to talk about in terms of what Justice No Jails is doing, because we want to talk about some solutions here in terms of what's happening. I know there's a ballot measure coming up, next year around the LA County Jail. So I'm going to ask, Dr. Abdullah to maybe speak, to that. I try to get Patrice today, but she's at the Pride, parade. That's why I'm wearing my, my hat in solidarity with our LGBTQ community. So, but what I want to just get to, this, what I call immoral alliance between racially biased prosecutors, desperate prosecutors, and racist police, around that. 1989, it happened. How is that manifesting itself, Dr. Abdullah, today as we're dealing with what's happening with policing, in the city and county of Los Angeles, but also, in terms of what's happening around the district attorney, and what we're dealing with, around that. Is there still a collusion? I really call it an immoral alliance, and I'm going to stick to that in terms of that. Any thoughts on that?
Sure. So you might have seen me on my phone just now because I was trying desperately to remember who the youngest member of the Central Park Five was. Antron McCray is the name we were digging for. Antron McCray. So I just want to make sure that we get that in
the one who was hit by the police when he was laying on his back, right? And they even used that against him, and saying that the woman did that damage, and it was actually a policeman who hit him with his helmet.
Absolutely. So when you talk about this immoral, this unjust alliance, all the systems, again, it's a set of evil geniuses who constructed these systems, right? They're intertwined. And when we think about prosecutors, I am so thankful that Linda Fairstein is being held accountable.
Oh, yeah.
So this also tells you that you ain't never done. You do wrong, karma's going to get you eventually. You might think you made it as a best-selling author. Eventually, what you did to those 5 black boys and all the other ones whose names we don't know, that's going to come back for you, right? And so I'm thankful that if people don't know that she was dropped by her publisher, her name is out. I'm sorry.
She resigned from the college that she was on the board of. In fact, the students demanded it.
Right. So we absolutely have to always do that. And it's also a lesson to us that sometimes it feels like a battle is lost, but it's not. You just keep fighting. You're going to win eventually. So, this is 30 years later. She's being held accountable, right? I think that what we're looking at when we talk about district attorneys and prosecutors, they do 2 things. One, they target black folks, and also whatever happens to black folks, Lonnie Woodnear talks about black people being the miner's canary, right? That's right. That what happens to black folks hits us first, but it's going to hit brown folks. It's going to hit poor folks. It hits people with mental health challenges, right? They target us, they criminalize us, they prosecute us, they use us to populate their jails and prison systems, right? And then they also use it to be kind of this scarlet letter that we carry with us for the rest of our lives, right? So that's the first thing district attorneys do, right? The second thing that they do, though, is give a pass to the police who engage in this work, right, who are on the front lines of this work. And the policing work begins with the targeting, but at its peak, at its most extreme point, it includes the murder of black people, right? So here in Los Angeles, in the last 6 years, since our district attorney, Jackie Lacey, right, has been in office, 532 people have been killed by police. Get that, 532, that's almost 100 people a year have been killed by police. She has chosen not to prosecute those officers. Only after being outside of her office for over a year did she choose to charge one officer. 531, no charges. One, she's pressed charges against. We have to remember, and she's one of those happens to be black people, right, who are engaged in a system that assaults and brutalizes and kills and preys upon the rest of the black community. And so I don't give her a pass because she's black, right? Because she happens to be black. We need to hold them accountable. And so policing is one piece of it, but I think that the what When They See Us did so brilliantly is show how it's not just the police, it's the prosecutors, it's the prison system, it's the prison guards.
All connected.
It's, all of these things. It's mass media, right? They're all connected.
I want to say again, I mentioned earlier that the slave institution hasn't ended. And let's just kind of go back to that for a moment. In order for there to have been hundreds of millions of people transported from their homes, it required kidnapping, the stealing of bodies, including babies, the incarceration on ships and before the ships in the castles and in the dungeons along the West African coastline. Kidnapping, murder. We don't even know how many tens of millions of people didn't complete the passage because they died at sea.
Let's just say what it is. It was a black Holocaust.
It was a black Holocaust, okay? And it was legal.
Yeah.
It was legal. It was protected. And anyone who was captured and attempted to escape was a criminal. If you tried to seek your freedom, not only were you a criminal, you could be shot dead or hung without any recourse or any reprisals against the person who killed you. It was legal, it was protected, it was codified, and it has not changed. What we are seeing now is a more compassionate way to perpetuate an ungodly, demonic structure that goes on right to today. We make it perhaps a little more palatable, but the same criminal activity that was legalized continues today in its various forms. That's why, again, I say, it's not what you do. It's who you are and where you are. If you can kidnap and murder and displace people and have that protected by law, what else on this planet are you capable of doing?
Right. I would say it's a perversion of compassion.
Right.
In terms of that, because just because you treat me bad in a nice way doesn't necessarily in terms. But we want to talk solutions too, because this brings up so many. That's why I call it was painful. It was, hurtful. It was, but it was also hopeful because of how it ended. I know, we were involved, in what the interfaith, what the movement has done, around the transformation of the prison industrial complex through Justice Not Jails. I want to just let you say a little bit about that, briefly, because
Sure.
we got to close. But I want to make sure we get this in. And then, we are with Dignity and Power, joining forces. A lot of organizations are coming together. We were part of collecting, signatures for this ballot. 250,000 signatures to get this, on the ballot in 2020. It's going to be on and popping in 2020 with just the transformational, liberative work we seek to do, in the city and county of Los Angeles and also statewide, with schools and communities. But I'm going to ask Dr. Abdullah to say a little bit about, the ballot, a measure that we are preparing ourselves for. But quickly, Justice Not Jails,
Sure.
Ballot measure, and then we close up.
Justice Not Jails was birthed here in Los Angeles County. Patrice Cullors came to Progressive Christians Uniting with concerns about her brother, who was in the Los Angeles County Jail and the treatment there, which gave rise to Black Lives Matter. The work of moving inside a structure and calling it out and organizing people across faith traditions to say that we cannot be witnesses and be silent at the same time.
Right.
And so we began to organize through first Progressive Christians Uniting and then Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity to look at the incarceration numbers and the conditions under which people reside while incarcerated. And our discovery, we took clergy inside the jails, we're inside the prisons, and we're saying these conditions are unconscionable, cannot continue without some structural change. So Justice Not Jails is exactly that. I like to say compassion, the true understanding of compassion, and not jails. But Justice Not Jails is saying to all of us, there is another way and a better way. We do not put people in prison to resolve their mental health issues, to resolve their economic issues, to resolve the conditions that perpetuated a system and structure, and now they're incarcerated. So we organize through faith organizations, through churches, through mosques, masjids, through temples and synagogues. We organize and we create advocates and we create activists to remove the complex of the prison industrial complex that has dominated our tax resources and decimated our communities.
Right. Give us the website where people can get information about that for the movement.
Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. I am #4 humanintegrity.org.
Right.
I am #4 humanintegrity.org.
For more information on that one. Quickly, the ballot measure that we preparing ourselves to win in 2020.
So Reform LA Jails, it was a grassroots effort. We got over 247,000 signatures. We'll round up, make it 250,000 signatures of people who say we don't want to continue to expand the largest jail system in the world. We want to put that money into resources that actually make communities safe. And we want to hold people accountable. We want a Sheriff's Oversight Commission that has actual power. In Los Angeles, we have a police commission that has power but no will. We have a Sheriff's Oversight Commission that has will but no power. And so we want to change that. So March 2020, be looking for the Reform LA Jails ballot measure, and we need to tell everybody now to vote yes. We need to be very clear that we're up against police associations. We're up against those who benefit from incarceration. And so this is a people's movement to make sure that we pass this in March 2020. So that's the presidential primary. The other thing that we want people to look out for on the March 2020 ballot is the district attorney's name in Los Angeles County is Jackie Lacey. She's, in my view, one of the worst district attorneys in the nation. We need to get her out. And so we have a grassroots effort called Buy Jackie 2020. So we don't want to see her reelected.
All right. She's
responsible for 532 folks being killed by police and no accountability, as well as the very vigorous prosecution of black and poor and brown and unhoused and folks with mental health challenges. And so Buy Jackie, no to Jackie Lacey, yes to Reform LA Jails.
There we have it. Yeah. All right. And that's going to be...
We need to remind your viewers and your listeners, the largest mental health facility in the United States is the Los Angeles County Jail.
Yeah.
The largest mental health facility in the United States is the Los Angeles County Jail, and $3.5 billion being earmarked to increase that facility is not the way to go.
There you have it, Faith Without Borders, where we seek to have thought-provoking conversation for transformational action. We hope that you have been informed, you've been enlightened. Most of all, you've been activated to engage, utilizing your faith, not as a form of escapism, but as a call to activism, to see how we can move towards a more just and fair society where we don't have to be concerned about how they see us, but we can confirm how we see us as sacred beings, as human beings created in the image of the divine. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. This has been Faith Without Borders. I want to thank my guest, my dear sister, Dr. Abdullah, and my brother, Reverend Cripps, for being here with us. We'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.